Let's have a look at the header paragraph of the regional sales contract. This is the first paragraph of the contract. It's located right beneath the title. It has very important information in it that must be correct. The first blank is the contract date. This is the date that the contract was written. It's the date that the contract was prepared by the agent and signed by the buyer for presentation to the seller. It may not be the actual date that the contract is presented to the seller. It is the date that the contract is written. It is not the date of ratification. It is not the date that the contract is enforceable. It is simply the date that the contract was prepared by the buyer's agent for presentation to the seller. The next couple of blanks in the header paragraph deal with identification of the parties. The first party to deal with in the first blank line there is who is the purchaser. The name that goes in this blank, or the names that go in this blank, are all of the people who intend to be on title to the property. All of the people are obligated to complete this purchase transaction. Those people are required to sign on the last page of the sales contract. What is important to you as a realtor is not just to make sure all of the names are included in there, but they are all spelled correctly. Because if they're not spelled correctly, what could end up happening is those errors could be transmitted and appear in the loan documents and even in the title documents at closing. You want to be part of the resolution, not part of the problem. Let's identify the seller. Same rules. Make sure the names are properly spelled, and very importantly, make sure that whoever is on title to the property, their names appear here and they've signed the contract. That deals with identifying who the parties are. Who also is important are you guys, the brokers. So first we deal with identifying who is the listing company. The listing company, that's the company that represents the seller. They always represent the seller. That's the company that put the property on the market. That's the company that put the property in the MRIS. That's the company that put out the for sale sign. That's the company that holds the open houses, and they always represent the seller. The next company to identify is the selling company. Sometimes the selling company represents the buyer. Sometimes the selling company represents the seller. The selling company only represents the buyer if the buyer and the selling agent who works for the selling company has entered into a buyer-broker agreement. In the event that a buyer-broker agreement has not been executed between the buyer and the selling agent, in that instance, the selling agent will then represent the seller. That does happen sometimes. The selling agent could drive the buyer around, write the contract, representing the seller, and having the buyer as a customer. Still, notwithstanding the fact that the agent working with the buyer represents the seller, that agent is obligated to be honest and fair with the buyer, using all the standard contracts and following all of the appropriate laws. Even though these two blanks have been appropriately filled in by you in preparing the contract, the completion of this section of the contract is not in lieu of, but in addition to, your obligation to use all of the standard required agency disclosure forms prescribed by Washington, D.C., Maryland, or Virginia.